The name Trigona comes from a local honeybee, which is native to the southern hemisphere around the world. You can find it in some parts of South America, but most predominantly in Malaysia and Indonesia. That's why we decided to name the bar after this humble honeybee.
If you love an old-fashioned, then join us while Rohan Matmary from Bar Trigona at the Four Seasons Hotel in Kuala Lumpur shows us how to make their spring riff, the Bumblebee.
Within the ingredients, the Trigona honey definitely is the heartbeat of our cocktail program. But we also focus on the natural abundance of Malaysia, what we produce or what we use in our daily lives. We try to curate them into cocktails here at Bar Trigona.
Tell us a little bit about your present menu, the Colour Me Curious.
Right. So our present menu, the Color Me Curious, you would see it's very colorful. Definitely is a research-based model. We did a research for 8 months to kind of determine what actually is lacking in hotel bars. And what we realized that a lot of people think of hotel bars as very sophisticated and dark places. So we wanted to change that, and then we came up with this concept called Color Me Curious. So color definitely is the vibrance. That's how the country of Malaysia is as well. Very vibrant with three cultures: Malaysians, Indians, and Chinese all together. So the cocktails, the food, the entire country is very vibrant. So we definitely wanted to showcase that. And curiosity is something which is a very interesting thing for me. So I personally love curious flavors. That's how the name Color Me Curious came along. And the menu itself is divided into four parts. The first part is called the unique and local. That's what is Trigona's signature style of making cocktails. So we take something which is a daily to-do in Malaysia and we put it in cocktails. So tourists who come to the hotel or come to the city get a chance to try something in a form of cocktail. So that's the unique and local section that comprises of fantastic Malaysian produce, something which would be a street snack. Then we have the second section called the bottled cocktails. Now, of course, we are a hotel bar and we get a lot of tourists from around the world. So if somebody likes a drink, they would want to take it back. So that's why we started this small little section called the bottled cocktails. The Bumblebee is a part of that because the Bumblebee is our signature and it's also very, very popular. So we decided to put it on bottles. So if the bar gets busy, we always hand people some bottles out. And then we have the honey flight section, which is a beautiful flight of three classic cocktails with a Malaysian twist and Trigona honey. So in there we have the penicillin, the bee's knees, and the airmail. Very classic, some forgotten, some very contemporary classic cocktails, but with Trigona honey. So you get to see how the honey plays differently in three different cocktails. Usually, our recommendation to start with this if it's your first time at Bar Trigona, because you get to try three drinks at the price of one, and also you can kind of see what our style of making drinks is. And then the last, we have the spirit-free section, which is the non-alcoholic section. Of course, in Malaysia, for us, it's very important to have a really beautiful and albeit yet complex a non-alcoholic cocktail menu. We have people of different walks in life, so we have to cater to all of them. So the spirit-free section also works wonderfully well.
The Bumblebee is the cocktail you're going to be making for us today. Tell us a little bit more about it.
The Bumblebee is a cocktail which has always stayed on Bar Trigona's menu since its inception in different forms or variations. Initially, the idea was to have Trigona honey to be beautifully showcased into an old-fashioned drink, and then every bartender who came along tried to add a touch to it. And the Bumblebee is my touch to the Trigona's legacy. It is a classic old-fashioned. We use a mix of bourbon and rye whiskies because we feel that bourbon and honey could be a little bit oversweet. So we balance it out with some rye whiskey to add a touch of spiciness. And then the current version of Bumblebee is a little bit floral. So for that we add Amaro Montenegro because it's a nice Amaro with vegetal notes, but also a little bit of floral notes. So that adds to it. And then we have orange blossom water just to accentuate the sensual experience for the old fashioned. And then the most important ingredient, the Trigona honey.
Do you want to show us how it's done?
It is a bottled cocktail, so we make it behind the bar and we bottle it for all our guests, but we also serve it by the glass so you can enjoy it as a cocktail and not as a bottled drink. We started with a mixing glass and we use Michter's bourbon whiskey. It's a nice, delicious, smooth whiskey, good for an old fashioned. 30 mils of that going straight. And like I mentioned, to balance out the sweetness of the bourbon and the honey, we're going to touch it with some rye whiskey. So just about 20 mils of the rye whiskey in there. This one's going to add a touch of spiciness from the rye and going to balance out the old fashioned really well. Next is Trigona honey. It's a beautiful honey which is not very thick. It's actually very thin, so goes very well in cocktails, and it's also got a really nice sour note, unlike most of the honeys which are very sweet. So that kind of actually balances as the cocktail for us. That goes about 10 ml in there. And that Amaro Montenegro. Now we have the sweetness and the sourness and the spiciness. We're going to add a touch of floral notes and also make it a little bit more boozy. And voila, that's all. So we give it a nice quick stir to get the honey mixed in really well. Then we load it up with some ice. I like to serve it over a block of ice. You just make sure everything is nice and chilled. We are in Malaysia, so it's a fairly tropical environment over here. Give it a nice quick stir. So all the ingredients are nice and combined. And we just pour it over the block. To garnish this, we're going to use local honeycomb. It's made in Malaysia, but it's called the Hungarian honeycomb because it's a different style of it. Usually in honeycomb, the wax is not very edible, but in the Hungarian style of it, it's very edible, so people can just take a bite of it. On top, we also have some beautiful bee pollen, also from the Trigona farms. So get you a touch of the farm, get you a touch of the story behind it, also a different element, a little bit crunchy there. And then we garnish it with local pentas flowers. Usually come in two colors, white and pink, so we try to put both of them on top and make it nice and beautiful. A little bit floral, so you have a slightly more mellow and milder version of an old fashioned right over there. There you have it, the Bumblebee. Cheers.
Give us more detail about the flavour of the drink.
All right, let me try it. I haven't had it in a while. So, like an old fashioned, which is like a very bittersweet cocktail, it's very much on point. So you have the alcohol, the booziness of an old fashioned in there with the Trigona honey. So you have a honey note on there. You've got a light citrus note, almost like a fermented note, which comes from the Trigona honey. Very, very nice and robust, rounded, old fashioned, touch of sourness, spice, floralness, and just a beautiful array of flavors within one glass.
Now, if somebody's making this at home and they can't get the Trigona honey,
Right.
would you recommend that they made a honey syrup?
Yes, depending on the honey you're using. Most of the honey we get commercially outside is a bit dehydrated, so you would see it's very thick. If your honey is thick, I would recommend you to do a 2 to 1, 2 parts honey, 1 part hot water. Mix it together into a honey syrup and then use that, about 15 mils of that, into your old fashioned. But if you are using raw honey, which is really thin, then I would recommend you to go straight with the honey.
Is there anything that might trip people up if they were making this at home?
The most important thing would be the honey itself. So I would recommend you to try the honey first and understand what the flavor profiles are. What would you generally want in a honey-based old fashioned is number one, the honey flavor to be more profound than the whiskeys itself. And the number two and the most important thing would be the flavor profile of the drink itself. So try it a couple of times, see what works best for you. But yes, while an old fashioned is a very simple drink, it's also a very difficult drink to balance. So try it a couple of times and see what recipe works for your honey the best.
And what, in your view, makes this riff of an old fashioned better than the original?
So this one especially gives a sense of belonging to the place itself, right? Yes, we are a hotel bar, and a lot of people would generally expect you to have a classic old fashioned on the menu or stuff. Yes, we do classic old fashions, but this is our riff because when you come to our bar, we want you to feel something special about the location. So for us, we're here in Malaysia. We want you to try a different sweetener than a sugar. That's why we would always recommend you to try for the Bumblebee. Also, we have a couple of other old fashions on the menu. So if you're not a very big fan of floral old fashions, you could always go for a more umami old fashioned or more bittersweet, more classic driven old fashioned. But as this one, the Bumblebee, we definitely recommend every guest who comes to the bar to try it once because this one is like a real signature serve for us at the bar.
And what occasion do you imagine this drink being good for?
So usually from 5 to 10 p.m. Be a more on a highball style drink, whereas 9 to 10 p.m. onwards is when people want to come in, have a seat, have one drink, enjoy the evening, more like a nightcap. So this is one for them. So that's why we always serve it in a bottle as well. So a lot of people want to take it back to their rooms or take it back home. Have a good dinner and then just enjoy a drink. This is a perfect one. And then we serve it by the bottle, so it's very easy to just pour over ice and drink. So really want people to kind of enjoy this as the one last drink.